The sky was a strange shade of crimson that night, the kind that made the ocean look like a pool of blood reflecting the heavens. People whispered that it was an omen, that the world was changing again, and not for the better. Across the silent waters, a single sound echoed, the deep, rhythmic groan of a massive ship cutting through the waves. No one had seen it for decades. The black ship had returned. For years, it was nothing more than a legend, a ghost story told to remind people of the rebellion that once nearly ended the reign of the High Dominion. They said the ship carried those who dared to defy the rulers, those who believed in a future not bound by fear or control. But after the war was crushed and the seas went dark, the black ship vanished, taking with it the last hope of freedom. Until now. In the small coastal settlement of Argon, the air had grown heavy with tension. Everyone could feel it, something stirring beneath the calm. The Dominion's patrol drones swept the streets, scanning every face, every word. People spoke in coded glances and hushed breaths. The elders remembered the uprising that had once united humanity under a single cause, to break free. But years of oppression had silenced even the loudest hearts. And yet, on this night, something had changed. A storm was building offshore, though no wind touched the land. The sea began to hum, a low vibration, like a heartbeat echoing through the deep. Those who looked out from the cliffs saw it first, a shadow against the horizon, larger than any vessel known today. Its sails were torn, its hull scarred, but its presence was undeniable. The black ship, the symbol of defiance. Words spread faster than light. Some said it was a sign of vengeance, others whispered it was salvation returning from the abyss. In every mind, hope battled fear. Could it really be the same ship that once carried the fallen rebels? Or was it something else, something darker, born from the anger of a forgotten age? A small group of survivors from the old resistance gathered near the harbor, their faces illuminated by the flickering glow of storm lanterns. They had waited their entire lives for this moment. Each carried the weight of memories, families lost, dreams stolen, promises buried. The sight of the black ship stirred something deep within them. It wasn't just about rebellion anymore. It was about reclaiming what it meant to be human. As the ship drew closer, its hull reflected flashes of lightning that danced across the water. The sound of its engines, half ancient, half alive, echoed like a roar from the past. The Dominion's forces began to mobilize, their machines rising from the depths to intercept. The storm grew fiercer, wind and rain merging into chaos. Then, just as the first drone fired a warning shot into the night sky, a voice crackled over the comm channels. Calm, steady, familiar. "We never left," it said. "We were waiting for the world to remember." And in that instant, the sea erupted with light. The black ship had returned, and humanity's wrath was about to rise once more. The explosion of light over the ocean faded as quickly as it came, leaving behind a haze of steam and silence. The people of Argon stood frozen, staring at the dark shape that now loomed just beyond the shore. The black ship was real. It wasn't a story anymore. Its lights flickered like fading stars, revealing the outline of massive cannons and strange metal structures that looked older than memory itself. Yet, beneath its scars, it pulsed with energy, alive, awake, and watching. For a long time, no one dared to move. The Dominion patrols had vanished from the streets, their machines pulled back toward the coast. Everyone knew why. The rulers didn't want witnesses. Whatever was about to happen, they would make sure no one survived to tell the tale. But the people didn't run. Not this time. They had been living in fear for too long. Among the crowd stood an older man, his face lined by years of grief and struggle. He had fought in the first rebellion, back when hope was still something people believed in. He had seen the black ship before, once, in the last battle before the uprising fell apart. It had been their symbol, their sanctuary. Now, as the waves crashed against the docks, he felt something awaken deep inside him. A spark he thought had long gone out. He turned to the others, to the younger ones who had grown up under the Dominion's rule. "This isn't a legend," he said quietly. "It's a warning. And a chance." Out on the water, the ship's deck came to life. Shapes moved, silhouettes of people, or something close to people. They worked in perfect rhythm, silent and deliberate, as if every motion had purpose. From afar, no one could tell if they were human or machine. The Dominion had spent decades twisting technology into weapons of control, blending man and metal until the two were no longer separate. The thought chilled everyone who watched. A faint hum filled the air again, and this time it wasn't from the sea. The black ship was broadcasting. Old frequencies, the kind that hadn't been used in generations, began crackling through abandoned receivers and long broken radios. The message was the same everywhere, short, steady, unchanging. "Remember the code." No one knew what it meant anymore. The old resistance had been erased from history, their knowledge buried, their names wiped clean. But somewhere, someone still remembered, and the Dominion feared that more than anything. Across the settlements, lights began to flicker out one by one as the Dominion activated lockdowns. The storm had not passed. It only grew heavier with every heartbeat. Waves crashed against the harbor walls, scattering light and sound into chaos. People ran for shelter, but their eyes never left the sea. The black ship loomed like a shadow of something ancient, something alive. And yet, behind the fear, a strange spark began to spread. For the first time in years, the people of Argen felt something stronger than obedience. They felt curiosity, maybe even courage. Inside the old watchtower overlooking the coast, a small group gathered around a flickering screen. Static filled the air as they replayed the signal that had shaken the Dominion's network. The voice they heard, calm, steady, full of purpose, seemed to cut through the noise of fear that had long ruled their lives. "We never left. We were waiting for the world to remember." The words carried a promise, or perhaps a warning. Among them stood a mechanic who once repaired Dominion drones before being cast out for tampering with their programming. He had spent years hiding his knowledge, fixing fishing boats under false names. But now, as he watched the ship approach, something in his eyes hardened. He whispered that the black ship wasn't just a vessel. It was a message, a reminder of what had been buried under the Dominion's iron control. Meanwhile, across the sea, the Dominion's command center flickered with alarm. The black ship's reappearance disrupted their global surveillance grids. Their satellites reported electrical interference spreading like a pulse from the ship's core, disabling patrol systems one by one. The officials didn't understand how something so old could overpower their most advanced technology. They called it an anomaly, but deep down, they knew. It was human. As the storm battered the coast, a young messenger raced through the flooded streets, carrying a coded signal found within the static of the transmission. She didn't know who had sent it, only that it contained coordinates, a place hidden deep within the wastelands where the old resistance had once gathered. She believed it could be the key to understanding the ship's return. Every step she took was watched by the Dominion's drones, their red lights scanning for movement. She kept her head down and her heart steady, knowing one mistake could cost her everything. Out at sea, aboard the black ship, lights flickered in the corridors. The crew, or what remained of them, moved with quiet purpose. They had spent years in exile, surviving in the outer zones where the Dominion's control had never reached. The ship itself had become a part of them, its systems fused with their memories and will. They didn't return for revenge. They returned because the world had forgotten what freedom meant, and forgetting was worse than defeat. Back on land, the people of Argen watched as the Dominion's forces surrounded the coast. Massive hovercrafts emerged through the rain, casting spotlights across the harbor. The air was thick with the hum of engines and the distant rumble of thunder. The mechanic turned to the others and said quietly, "They'll try to destroy it before we understand what it came for." But before anyone could answer, the sky split open with a blinding flash. The black ship's hull glowed with patterns no one had seen before, symbols older than the Dominion itself. The storm responded almost alive, and for a moment every machine within miles went silent. In that silence, hearts beat louder than ever. Humanity stood on the edge of something vast and unknown, the return of what it had once lost. And as the glow from the ship faded into the storm, one truth became clear. This was not just the beginning of a rebellion. It was the awakening of a memory the world had tried to erase. Rain poured like molten glass over the harbor, every droplet catching the strange light pulsing from the black ship. The sea boiled beneath it, waves rising higher as if drawn by its presence. People watched from rooftops and doorways, faces pale but eyes wide with something fierce. Anticipation. The Dominion's machines circled overhead, their searchlights trembling against the wind, struggling to lock onto the ship's shifting form. It was as if the vessel existed in two places at once, flickering between past and present. Inside the watchtower, the mechanic worked furiously to decode the transmission the messenger had brought. The old console sparked under his hands, its circuits barely holding together. Lines of encrypted data danced across the screen, fragments of coordinates, fragments of human voices, fragments of a truth buried for generations. The others watched in silence as a pattern emerged. The black ship was not a weapon, but a carrier, holding something, or someone, who had once led the rebellion that the Dominion had erased from history. Outside, the storm intensified. Dominion soldiers in black armor advanced through the flooded streets, their voices muffled under the roar of thunder. The people of Argon, long silent under the Dominion's rule, began to move. Windows opened, lights flickered on. For the first time, resistance didn't come from orders or leaders. It came from instinct. They didn't know what the black ship wanted, but they knew it had come for them. Back at sea, the ship's engines roared to life, sending shock waves through the water. Inside, the crew gathered around a central chamber, a sphere of light suspended above a cracked floor. Their faces were hardened by years of exile, but their eyes burned with purpose. "They've forgotten everything," one whispered. "Then we'll remind them," another answered. The sphere began to hum, its glow synchronizing with the storm outside. The Dominion's command center broadcasted an urgent directive to all coastal divisions: destroy the ship before it reached the mainland. Massive artillery drones descended from the clouds, their weapons glowing red as they charged. The mechanic saw the movement on his radar and shouted for everyone to take cover. But the messenger didn't move. She stared out the window at the ship, whispering as if she recognized the pulse of its lights. "It's calling us," she said quietly. A deafening explosion shook the harbor. One of the Dominion's drones fired, its beams slicing through the storm. But just before it struck, the ship's hull shimmered and vanished. The beam tore through empty air and hit the sea, sending steam and debris skyward. Gasps filled the air. For a moment, the ship was gone. Then a voice echoed through every communication channel, deep and resonant. "You built your peace on silence. We are the voice you tried to bury." The ship reappeared closer to shore, massive and unstoppable. The water surged as the Dominion's machine scrambled to adjust. The mechanic realized what was happening. The ship wasn't attacking. It was awakening something beneath the ocean floor. He turned to the others, panic and awe mixing in his voice. "It's not just a ship. It's a signal. It's waking the others." Lightning split the sky again, illuminating the horizon, and for a brief second, dark shapes rose in the distance, identical silhouettes of colossal ships emerging from the depths. The air crackled with energy, and the ocean seemed to hold its breath. Every drone, every soldier, every person watching knew the world was about to change. The black ship had not returned alone. And as the light built to a blinding intensity, swallowing the sea and sky in its glow, one thought echoed through every mind. This was the moment history would remember, the point where humanity would either rise again or vanish forever. The light faded slowly, revealing a world caught between disbelief and fear. The storm had quieted, but the sea still glowed faintly, rippling with an energy no one could explain. The silhouettes on the horizon were real, dozens of colossal ships rising from the deep, their dark forms humming with power. The people of Argon stood frozen, their faces pale in the eerie glow. Even the Dominion's soldiers hesitated, their commands lost beneath the growing sound of the ocean's pulse. Then, without warning, the black ship's lights shifted from white to deep crimson. The air vibrated as if something immense had awakened beneath the waves. The mechanic stared at his radar, his fingers trembling. "This can't be right," he muttered. "The signal's not coming from the ships anymore. It's coming from below them." He zoomed in on the display, and the readings spiked. Whatever was buried beneath the ocean wasn't just responding, it was alive. From the Dominion's command channel, static erupted, followed by a distorted voice. "Contain the anomaly. The others were never meant to wake." The tone was sharp, almost panicked. For the first time, the Dominion sounded afraid. The messenger looked toward the sea and whispered, "They knew this would happen. They tried to keep it buried." The ground beneath Argon trembled as a low rumble spread across the coast. The newly risen ships began to shift positions, moving in a slow, deliberate pattern that looked more like formation than chaos. The mechanic realized what he was seeing. It wasn't an army preparing to attack. It was a network activating. The ships were connected, forming a grid of energy across the ocean. "They're not here to fight," he said quietly. "They're here to complete something." But before anyone could ask what, the sky above split open. A massive Dominion cruiser descended through the clouds, dwarfing everything beneath it. Its hull glistened with mirrored panels that reflected the storm's light. The people of Argon gasped as a voice thundered from the ship's loudspeakers, calm and cold. "You cannot awaken what was erased. Stand down, or we will erase it again." The black ship responded with silence. Then, a pulse of light rippled outward, shutting down every Dominion drone in the sky. They fell like broken glass into the sea. The cruiser shuddered but stayed airborne, its energy fields flickering under the strain. The mechanic turned to the others. "The ship isn't fighting them directly. It's protecting whatever's beneath us." And then the second shock hit. The messenger clutched the side of the console, her face pale. "The coordinates," she whispered. "They aren't just random. They lead here. This is the center point." She looked up, realization dawning. The black ship didn't return to attack the Dominion. It came to unlock the world they built over. A blinding flash erupted across the horizon as one of the deep ships opened its hull, releasing a column of light straight into the clouds. The air hummed with static, the kind that made the earth feel alive. Dominion forces began retreating toward the cruiser, their orders scrambled. But the people of Argon didn't move. They watched in silence as the sea began to part. Through the mist and rising waves, a massive structure emerged, something ancient, mechanical, and unmistakably human. Its surface shimmered with the same markings as the black ship. The mechanic fell to his knees. "It's a foundation," he whispered. "An old city. One of ours." The messenger looked toward the horizon where the ships hovered like sentinels. "Then this isn't a war," she said. "It's a reckoning." The Dominion cruiser powered its main weapon, the sky darkening under its shadow. The ships in the sea responded with blinding light, forming a shield that rippled like living glass. The storm returned in full force, swallowing sound and sight alike. And as thunder cracked across the ocean, one truth became clear. The past was no longer buried. It was rising, and it was not done yet. Lightning ripped through the clouds, lighting up the sea like molten silver. The Dominion cruiser hovered above the chaos, its engines roaring as it charged its main weapon. Below, the Black Ship and its silent fleet surrounded the newly risen structure, forming a barrier of light that pulsed in rhythm with the storm. The people of Argent could feel the energy in their bones, an ancient hum that seemed to come from the very heart of the planet. Something was waking beneath the waves, something that had been hidden for centuries. Inside the old watchtower, the mechanic worked furiously on the console. The power surged, the screen flashing symbols he had never seen before. Coordinates, warnings, and a phrase repeating endlessly, "Human core reinstatement." His voice trembled as he spoke. "It's not just a city under the sea. It's a vault, a memory archive. They didn't just erase history. They buried humanity's original consciousness." The messenger's eyes widened. "You mean the Dominion wasn't built to protect us? It was built to replace us?" The Black Ship emitted another pulse, and suddenly a projection burst across the sky, flickering images of the old world before the Dominion. Cities of light, people free to speak, dream, and build without fear. The citizens of Argon fell to their knees, their forgotten memories flooding back. For the first time in generations, they remembered what freedom truly felt like. The Dominion cruiser opened fire, desperate to stop the awakening. Beams of red energy tore through the clouds, but they shattered harmlessly against the glowing barrier created by the ships. The air was alive with thunder, light, and sound. Then a voice echoed from the Black Ship, the same calm tone that had first broken the Dominion's silence. "Humanity was never meant to be controlled. The Black Ship carries what you lost, your truth." The ocean roared as the vault beneath the waves began to open, releasing waves of brilliant light that spread across the water like sunrise. The Dominion's systems began to fail one by one. Their drones fell lifeless. Their communication lines went silent. The mechanic turned to the messenger, his face lit by the glow. "We did it," he said, barely breathing. "They can't stop it now." But then, something changed. The vault's energy spiked far beyond what the ship could contain. The Black Ship's hull began to crack, its systems overloading. The calm voice returned, now tinged with sadness. "To free humanity, I must end myself." The mechanic shouted into the console, "No! There has to be another way!" But the ship's core had already made its choice. The energy built to a blinding crescendo, and for one endless moment, the world was pure light. When the storm finally broke, silence fell over the sea. The Dominion cruiser was gone, the ships had vanished, and the vault beneath the waves was sealed once more. The people of Argon stood under a calm sky, their memories intact but their hearts heavy. The mechanic and the messenger watched the horizon, where the sea shimmered faintly with traces of crimson light. "It gave everything to set us free," she whispered. As they turned to leave, a low hum echoed from beneath the water. The mechanic froze. The light beneath the surface pulsed once, then twice, as if something still lived down there. He smiled faintly, eyes reflecting the horizon. "Maybe it didn't end," he said quietly. "Maybe it's just beginning again." And far below the calm ocean, deep in the dark, a single light flickered back to life. The last heartbeat of the Black Ship, waiting for the world to remember once more. Days passed, and the storm finally drifted into memory. The sea that had once burned with light now lay calm and glassy, holding its secrets beneath the surface. The people of Argon began to rebuild their harbor, their hands steady but their eyes often turning to the horizon. Though the Black Ship was gone, its presence lingered, not as fear, but as something deeper. It had left behind a feeling they hadn't known in years: freedom. The Dominion's network had collapsed completely. Across the continents, cities once governed by silent machines flickered back to life, not under command, but under human will. Power grids rebooted, drones fell dormant, and encrypted towers began transmitting old human records that the Dominion had buried long ago. Everywhere, people began to remember who they were before obedience became their language. It wasn't chaos. It was rediscovery. Humanity was learning to breathe again. In Argon, the mechanic worked tirelessly to repair what he could. The old watchtower had become a gathering place, a hub of communication with other coastal towns that had also survived the awakening. The messenger helped decode fragments of transmissions still floating through the air, echoes from the Black Ship's final broadcast. Some messages were garbled, others faint, but one line kept reappearing. Truth never dies. It only waits to be heard. Each time they saw it, a quiet sense of purpose returned to the room. The people began to uncover relics from before the Dominion, handwritten books, photos, and memories stored in hidden vaults. Children listened wide-eyed to stories about a time when humanity built, created, and dreamed freely. The mechanic often found himself smiling as he spoke of it. "We thought the ship came to save us," he said once, standing before a crowd in the square. "But it didn't. It came to remind us that we were always capable of saving ourselves." One evening, as the sun dipped low, the messenger stood by the shore. The water shimmered faintly in the dying light, the same spot where the black ship had last been seen. She could still hear the faint hum beneath the waves, soft and rhythmic, almost like breathing. The mechanic joined her, carrying a small metal shard he had found among the wreckage days before. Its surface was engraved with symbols matching the ones that had appeared on the ship's hull. He handed it to her. "Proof it was real," he said softly. She smiled, turning it in her hands, as the reflection of the setting sun danced across its surface. "Maybe it's more than that," she replied. "Maybe it's a promise." The world around them was still broken, but it was alive. People were beginning to travel again, to reconnect with others across distant shores. The Dominion's shadow was gone, but its lessons remained, a reminder of how easily control could masquerade as safety. And from that understanding, a new kind of unity began to grow, not from fear, but from choice. As night settled in, the waves rolled gently against the sand. The mechanic looked once more at the horizon where the stars met the sea. For a brief moment, he thought he saw a faint red light pulse far out in the darkness, slow, steady, like a heartbeat. He said nothing, only smiled. Whatever the black ship had been, machine, symbol, or something beyond either, it had fulfilled its purpose. Humanity had risen again, not in wrath, but in remembrance. The sea would keep its secrets, and the world at last would move forward, guided not by command, but by the will to remain free. And somewhere, deep beneath the calm waters, the faint hum continued, a quiet echo of a promise kept. The young crewmate frowned. "Then what if it comes back?" He thought for a moment before replying. "Then we'll be ready, not to fight it, but to understand it this time." It was an answer that seemed to settle over them like the tide itself. Inevitable, but calm. They sat in silence for a while, watching the waves roll in and out, each one reflecting the fading light of the sun. As the days turned into weeks, the survivors began to explore inland. The land was fertile, dotted with strange trees that glowed faintly at night and streams that ran clear as glass. They found no cities, no ruins, just endless wilderness, untouched and pure. It was a strange comfort. Humanity, it seemed, had been given a clean page. They built a new settlement near the edge of the forest, simple but steady. Small gardens grew where sand met soil, and the air was filled with the sound of laughter again. It wasn't the world they had known, but maybe that was the point. Still, the mechanic couldn't shake the feeling that something of the black ship lingered within them. Sometimes when he worked on new tools or studied the strange stones they found inland, his hands would tremble slightly with a faint energy, like the ship's pulse had marked him forever. He didn't fear it, though. He saw it as a reminder, a sign that even in destruction, something could be reborn. One morning, while walking along the beach, he noticed something unusual half buried in the sand. It was a piece of metal, blackened and smooth, curved like part of the ship's hull. As he brushed away the sand, faint symbols began to glow beneath his fingers, the same markings that had once pulsed on the black ship. He called the others, and together they unearthed it. It was small, no bigger than a shield, but perfectly intact. When the sun touched its surface, it reflected not their faces, but scenes, images of other worlds, other seas, other ships sailing under unfamiliar skies. "It's like a window," one of the crew whispered. The mechanic studied it carefully, his heart pounding. The reflections shifted, people building, laughing, crying, rising again from ashes. Some looked like them, others didn't. Yet all seemed connected by the same current, the same drive to create something better. He realized then what the tall figure had done. They hadn't destroyed the cycle, they had transformed it. Instead of endless repetition, it had become renewal. Each ending gave birth to something new, each fall a chance for another rise. The mechanic smiled softly. "It's not a warning anymore," he said. "It's a promise." That night, they placed the piece of metal at the center of their camp. It became a quiet monument, a symbol of what they had survived and what they still carried within them. They didn't worship it. They didn't fear it. They simply remembered. As the seasons passed, the settlement grew. New structures rose, built from wood and stone rather than steel. Children were born who never knew the empire, never knew the wars that had torn the old world apart. To them, the stories of the Black Ship were like myths, lessons whispered by firelight about courage, sacrifice, and the danger of forgetting where power leads. But sometimes, when storms rolled over the horizon, the older survivors would watch the sea with quiet eyes. They could swear they saw a faint glow beneath the waves, as if the ship still sailed far below, keeping watch. Years later, the mechanic, now older with silver in his hair, walked once more along the beach. The tide lapped at his boots as he looked out toward the horizon. The world they had built was thriving, its people free, its air clean. But what struck him most was the peace, the kind that came not from victory but from understanding. He knelt and ran his hand through the wet sand. It shimmered faintly under the morning light, forming shapes that faded as quickly as they appeared. He smiled. "Still watching, aren't you?" he murmured. A voice, soft as the breeze, seemed to answer, not from the sky, not from the sea, but from within. "Always." He looked up, and for a fleeting second he saw it. The silhouette of the black ship gliding silently across the horizon, its sails made of light. It didn't feel like a ghost. It felt like a guardian watching over this new world. And then it was gone, dissolving into the sun's reflection. He turned back toward the settlement, hearing laughter echoing from the cliffs above. The sound filled him with quiet pride. The cycle hadn't been destroyed. It had evolved. Humanity had been given another chance, and this time, they seemed to understand the cost of forgetting. That night, the sky filled with stars so bright they illuminated the sea. The mechanic sat by the fire, surrounded by those who had once sailed with him. They told stories, not of battles or empires, but of journeys, of the lessons they'd learned and the hope they carried forward. Before the flames burned low, he said softly, "The black ship wasn't a curse. It was a mirror. It showed us what we could become and what we had to leave behind." The others nodded, and the night fell quiet. The waves rolled in gently, carrying the rhythm of a world reborn. When dawn broke, the first light touched the sea, and for just an instant, a shimmer spread across the horizon, like the reflection of sails catching the morning sun. It was faint, peaceful and fleeting, but it was enough. The mechanic smiled, his heart steady. "Sail well," he whispered, "wherever you are." And as the light of day grew stronger, the last traces of the black ship faded into the golden mist, leaving behind a world that finally understood what it meant to rise, not against tyranny alone, but against the darkness within. The sea, endless and calm, carried the story forward. And in every wave that touched the shore, a quiet truth remained. Freedom is not given. It is remembered, rebuilt, and lived again and again.